The town laughed at the unchosen bride, until a cowboy took her hand before everyone. The morning sun stretched across the dusty plains of Nova Terra, a frontier planet far from the bustling cities of old Earth. Its red soil sparkled faintly under the pale light, and small colonies dotted the landscape like scattered gems. Among them, the town of Claridge seemed almost ordinary. Wooden buildings lined the main street, though their walls were reinforced with alloys to withstand the planet's unpredictable storms. Humming drones floated quietly overhead, delivering messages, packages, and occasionally curious glances at passers-by. Leora walked through the town square, her boots kicking up tiny clouds of ochre dust. Her hair, the color of sun-bleached wheat, was tied back in a practical braid, and her hands were faintly streaked with the dust of machinery and soil. Even on the busiest mornings, she moved with calm purpose, her mind already running through calculations and plans. Today was different, though. The air carried a faint buzz of excitement, mixed with whispers and stifled laughter. It was the day of the selection ceremony, a tradition held once a year. The ceremony was meant to pair the town's young adults for life, based on their skills, contributions, and, sometimes, appearances. In truth, most of the town's folk cared more about appearances than actual skill, a fact that had left Leora on the sidelines for years. Children ran through the square, waving small flags and banners as merchants set up colorful stalls. Machines clanged softly in the background, and the scent of freshly baked bread mixed with the faint tang of the terraforming chemicals Leora had been experimenting with in her small workshop. She ignored it all, keeping her gaze steady on the central platform where the ceremony would be held. The townspeople noticed her immediately. Whispering began. "There she is. The unchosen bride," muttered someone under their breath. A soft laugh echoed, and Leora ignored it, though it stung slightly. She had grown used to it over the years. The town had never truly appreciated her. While others boasted about their charm, dances, or flashy inventions, Leora had focused on practical solutions, repairing water systems, designing more efficient solar panels, and teaching younger children the basics of robotics. Skills, it seemed, did not earn applause in Claridge. Leora's only solace was her work. Her latest project, a compact terraforming module, had shown promise. She had been testing it secretly for months, tweaking energy outputs, adjusting soil regulators, and ensuring it could produce clean water and arable land faster than anyone had imagined possible. It was her ticket to proving that brains mattered as much as charm or bravado, but she kept it quiet. Recognition, after all, had rarely come easily in this town. As she reached her workshop, a group of young women passed by, giggling. One of them, Tara, leaned forward and whispered loudly enough for several nearby merchants to hear. "I can't believe she's here again. Still not chosen, huh?" Leora took a slow breath, her hands tightening around the edge of her bag. She wanted to respond, to defend herself, but years of repeated mockery had taught her patience. Instead, she focused on her workbench, where half-finished circuits and small terraforming sensors lay scattered. A sudden shadow fell across her workspace. Leora looked up, startled. "Quite the setup you have here," a voice said. She blinked and saw a man standing in the doorway, tall and lean, wearing a long coat with faded stripes. His boots were dusty, and a wide-brimmed hat shaded his face. But it wasn't the hat or the coat that caught her attention, it was the calm confidence in his eyes. They were bright, curious, and strangely warm. Hello," Leora said, unsure how to respond. "I'm Jace," the man said with a slight bow. "I just arrived on Novaterra. Thought I'd meet the locals. Mind if I look around?" Leora hesitated. Visitors were rare, and even rarer were those who didn't immediately dismiss her. Something about him felt different. "Sure," she said finally. "Just be careful with the equipment." He stepped inside, eyes scanning the workshop, lingering on the tools, sensors, and small terraforming devices. "You built all of this?" he asked. Yes, Leora replied, trying to keep her voice steady. I've been working on a project for the town, something practical. Jace nodded slowly. Practical, huh? That's rare these days. People tend to chase flash over substance, but I like substance. His words were simple, but they carried weight. Leora felt a small spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone would see her for who she truly was, rather than laughing at what she was. Meanwhile, outside, the town was gathering in the square. The selection ceremony was about to begin. Colorful banners waved in the wind, and the platform glistened in the morning sun. The town leaders, dressed in ceremonial robes, took their places. The chatter grew louder as suitors and young adults lined up, waiting for the traditional assessments. Some townspeople glanced at Leora's workshop, whispering again, "Look at her, still tinkering while everyone else gets ready." "She'll never be chosen," another said, shaking their head. Leora, hearing the faint murmurs, reminded herself of the quiet victories that mattered more than public approval. Still, a small ache pressed against her chest. She had always dreamed of recognition, not for vanity, but for the chance to show the town that intelligence and perseverance could change lives. She looked at Jace. He was observing her machines with an intensity that made her uneasy at first, then proud. "You have a lot of potential," he said. "Ever thought about showing it to everyone?" Leora frowned. "They wouldn't care, they never have." "Maybe not," Jace said with a grin. "But maybe they just need someone to open their eyes. Someone brave enough to show them what they're missing." Before she could answer, a child ran past the open door of her workshop, holding a small drone that whirred and beeped. It zipped through the air and out into the square, sending live images of Leora's workshop onto the town's large public screens. The crowd gasped. Leora froze. Her secret project, the terraforming module, flashed across the screens, tiny sensors blinking, soil regulators adjusting, water channels forming in a small patch of dirt. People stopped in their tracks. "Is that her?" someone whispered. "She's building something," another said, eyes wide. A few laughed nervously, unsure whether to mock or marvel. Leora felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment but from the sudden attention. Jace's grin widened. "See," he said softly. "People notice when brilliance can't be hidden." The crowd murmured and leaned closer to the screens, watching the small terraforming module in action. Tiny sprouts of green began to appear where the dry soil had been. Children clapped, amazed, and even a few elders shook their heads in disbelief. Leora's heart pounded. This was the moment she had always wanted, not for personal gain, but for the chance to show the town that intelligence mattered, that practical solutions could make life better for everyone. As the ceremony began, Leora felt a strange mixture of fear and excitement. She had always been on the sidelines, laughed at and ignored. But today, something was changing. The town was watching, and for the first time, it was her brilliance that drew attention, not her failures or the laughter of others. And through it all, Jace remained by her side, calm and steady. He hadn't come to judge or mock. He had come to see, and perhaps to understand, something that the rest of the town had overlooked for far too long. For the first time in her life, Leora felt the faint stirrings of hope. The unchosen bride, they called her. But maybe, just maybe, the story was about to change. The sun climbed higher and the town square filled with anticipation. Leora adjusted her tools one last time, her hands steady, her mind sharp. The selection ceremony would begin, but she was no longer just an observer. She was ready to show the town the value of intelligence, perseverance, and quiet courage. And perhaps, somewhere in the crowd, the future had already taken notice. The town of Claridge was still buzzing from the unexpected display in Leora's workshop. People whispered in corners, leaning closer to one another as though afraid to miss even a single detail. Small children ran around, pointing at the screens, their voices high with excitement. Leora herself stood quietly, her fingers tracing the edges of her workbench, trying to stay calm despite the growing attention. And yet, amidst the murmurs, one figure drew every eye not from the screens, but from his own presence. Jace, the tall stranger in his dusty cowboy coat and wide-brimmed hat, moved through the crowd with a confidence that seemed effortless. He wasn't flashy, yet people noticed him. His boots made soft, purposeful steps on the dirt street, and every movement seemed measured, thoughtful. Leora had watched him closely. There was something unusual about him, something human, yet different. He didn't laugh at her mistakes, nor did he smirk at her perceived failures. Instead, he watched with curiosity and, strangely, respect. "Mind if I step out and talk to them?" Jace asked, his voice low but steady. Leora blinked. "Talk to who?" "Everyone out there," he said, nodding toward the town square. "They've never really seen you, have they?" "Not fully," Leora frowned. "Most people don't care what I do. They only care if it looks flashy or matches the tradition." Jace tilted his head. "Maybe. But sometimes it just takes one person to change that. A little proof goes a long way." Before she could respond, Jace stepped outside. Leora hesitated, then followed. The square was alive with activity. Stalls lined the main street, and townspeople jostled each other to get a better view of the screens showing her terraforming module. The crowd was a mix of astonishment, curiosity, and lingering disbelief. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jace's voice rang clearly, cutting through the chatter, "if I may have your attention for a moment." People turned toward him, some frowning, some curious. Few had heard anyone speak so confidently in the middle of the festival. "I see many of you have discovered something remarkable," he continued, gesturing toward the screens. "Something that belongs to someone you've been overlooking for far too long." The whispers intensified. A few children clapped, and even some adults raised their eyebrows in surprise. Leora felt her heart beat faster. Jace was not just speaking for her. He was making a statement that the town could not ignore. "This brilliant mind belongs to Leora," he said, his voice steady. "She has been working quietly, solving problems no one else dared to attempt. And yet you laughed, ignored, or dismissed her." A murmur ran through the crowd. Faces shifted from smug amusement to uncertain curiosity. Leora's cheeks warmed, not from embarrassment, but from the shock of someone finally speaking in her favor. "She built this," Jace said, pointing to the module on the screens. "She built something that could save us time, energy, and perhaps even lives. She used skill, creativity, and determination. And now you have a chance to see it for yourselves." The crowd leaned closer, watching the tiny green sprouts emerge from the red soil on the screens. Some children cheered, running in circles, while elders nodded slowly, realizing that they had misjudged her. One woman, her arms folded, muttered, "I didn't think she could do that." "Neither did I," said an older man, scratching his chin. "But it seems we were wrong." Leora's heart swelled. She had never sought fame or recognition, but this acknowledgement felt like a quiet victory. She wanted to step forward and speak, but Jace gently shook his head. "Not yet," he said softly. "Let them come to you." The festival continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. People were no longer mocking her. They were watching with a mix of curiosity and respect. Even those who had laughed before seemed unsure now, as if afraid to reveal their previous ignorance. Jay stayed close to her side, his presence a steady anchor. "They'll come around," he said. "People respond to proof, not words, and you've given them plenty of proof." Leora nodded slowly. "It's just hard to believe after so many years." "Believe it," Jace said, smiling. "And don't let them forget it." The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity. Jace mingled with the townspeople, asking questions, sharing small stories of his travels between planets, and subtly highlighting Leora's achievements. Unlike most visitors, he didn't boast about himself. Instead, he spoke with warmth and encouragement, drawing attention to her work without overshadowing it. By noon, even the most skeptical townspeople had gathered near her workshop. Curiosity had replaced ridicule, and excitement had replaced indifference. Leora watched silently as they examined her tools, sensors, and partially built modules. Children asked questions, and she answered them patiently, explaining how the terraforming module worked in simple terms. "Why does it make the soil green?" one small boy asked, pointing to a sprout on the screen. "It has tiny regulators that mix water and nutrients," Leora explained. "They help the soil support life quickly, even on a planet where the soil is poor." The boy's eyes widened. "Wow, can it make flowers too?" "Yes," she said with a small smile. "Eventually, it can make gardens, trees, and even small farms." The boy ran to tell his friends, and soon, a small crowd of children gathered around, eager to see and learn. Leora realized that this, perhaps, was more important than recognition: the chance to inspire others, to show them what humans could do when they worked with intelligence, creativity, and care. Meanwhile, Jace spoke with the town elders, quietly persuading them to take Leora's work seriously. He didn't argue or insult. He simply highlighted the possibilities and the benefits to the community. Slowly, one by one, they began to nod, exchanging glances that carried a new respect. By late afternoon, the selection ceremony was about to begin. The platform in the town square gleamed under the sun, decorated with colorful banners. Leora felt a strange tension in the air. This was the moment she had avoided for years, the moment when her place in the town's social structure was supposed to be decided. She had no interest in the traditional selection. Her focus had always been her work, her inventions, and the quiet victories of problem-solving. Yet today, with Jace at her side and the town watching, something inside her shifted. Maybe the ceremony could be different this time. Maybe it wasn't about charm or flashy displays. It could be about intelligence, courage, and contribution. As the festival announcer called the participants to the stage, Leora felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see Jace, his hat tilted slightly back, eyes warm and steady. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Leora nodded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Together they stepped toward the platform. The crowd parted, murmuring in surprise. Some whispered, "Why is he with her?" Others muttered, "Who is that cowboy?" Jace didn't answer them. He walked confidently, guiding Leora with a gentle hand. She felt a strange sense of protection and reassurance. For the first time, she wasn't alone in facing the town's scrutiny. When they reached the platform, Jace turned to the crowd. "Everyone," he said loudly, "you have just seen what Leora can do. Now you have a choice: to continue laughing at her or to recognize her for the person she truly is." There was a pause, silence. The townspeople shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. Leora felt her heart race. The moment had come, not for personal glory but for truth, for acknowledgement of intelligence, and for a subtle challenge to the shallow traditions that had ruled the town for so long. Then, something remarkable happened. A few children stepped forward, clapping enthusiastically. "Hooray for Leora!" they shouted. Slowly, others joined in. First hesitant, then louder, until the entire square echoed with cheers. Even the elders smiled, some nodding in quiet approval. Leora blinked, overwhelmed. She had never expected this. And in the midst of the applause, Jace leaned closer and whispered, "See, people notice when brilliance can't be hidden." She smiled, her confidence growing. Perhaps, she thought, the town could change after all. Perhaps there was hope for Claridge, and for the future, where intelligence, creativity, and courage mattered more than appearances or shallow traditions. As the sun dipped lower, painting the red soil in golden light, Leora realized that this day was only the beginning. The cowboy had arrived, the town had noticed, and she was no longer the unchosen bride. She was a catalyst, a symbol of what humans could achieve when they refused to be ignored. And somewhere in the crowd, Jace's eyes met hers, filled with encouragement, promise, and a silent challenge. The story was far from over. After the unexpected cheers in the town square, Leora returned to her workshop with Jace close behind. The warmth of recognition still lingered in the air, but Leora knew the real challenge had only just begun. She had revealed a glimpse of her terraforming module to the town, but the full potential of her invention remained hidden, waiting to be seen. "Are you sure about this?" Leora asked, eyes scanning the small room crowded with devices, wires, and sensors. "Once they see the full test, there's no turning back." Jace nodded. "I know, but it's worth it. People need to see not just what you've done, but what's possible. It's time they understand your vision." Leora hesitated. Her hands brushed over the smooth metal of the terraforming module. It was compact but powerful, capable of creating small oases in the barren land around Clayridge. Months of careful adjustments, calculations, and trial and error had gone into it. The project had always been her private achievement, a quiet rebellion against the town's shallow traditions. "All right," she said finally, "but we do it at night. Fewer eyes, more focus." The night fell slowly, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges. The twin moons of Novaterra rose, casting pale light over the red soil. Leora and Jace carried the module to a barren stretch of land just outside town. The air was cool and crisp, filled with the faint scent of minerals and dry dust. "This is it," Leora said, kneeling to adjust the module's small regulators. "If it works properly, the soil here will start producing clean water channels and patches of greenery within hours." Jace crouched beside her, watching the adjustments with interest. "You've thought of everything," he said, almost in awe. "Even in the smallest details, your work is precise." Leora smiled faintly. "I had to be. No one else seemed to care if the module worked or not. It's always been me against the dust and dirt." With a final check, she activated the device. A soft hum filled the air, and tiny sensors on the module blinked in sequence. Then, with a faint shimmer, the barren soil began to respond. Small rivulets of water appeared, winding through the red dirt like silver threads. Patches of green sprouts emerged slowly, almost hesitantly at first, then growing stronger as if the soil itself recognized the promise of life. Jace's eyes widened. "It's beautiful." "It's not just beautiful," Leora said, her voice steady but filled with quiet pride. "It's proof. Proof that we can solve problems without relying on luck, tradition, or appearances. We can create solutions that last." They worked together, adjusting the module to extend the irrigation channels, stabilizing the soil, and enhancing the nutrient flow. As the green patches spread, the once barren land transformed into a small oasis, tiny but thriving. "Imagine this on a larger scale," Leora said softly, almost to herself. "We could make the planet habitable faster, support farms, provide water for everyone, and even prevent shortages." Jace nodded. "And imagine how the town will react when they see this. Not just a few sprouts on a screen, but a living, growing demonstration." Leora hesitated. The town's reaction could be unpredictable. Some might be amazed, while others might cling stubbornly to their old ways. But she trusted Jace's presence. It was like a shield, a reassurance that she was not alone in this moment. Hours passed as they monitored the module, making small adjustments and taking notes. The stars above shone brilliantly, reflecting off the smooth metal surfaces of the devices. Leora felt a sense of calm she rarely experienced. For once, she wasn't rushing against time or judgment. She was simply creating, and creation itself was enough. Suddenly, a soft rustling sound came from the edge of the cleared land. Leora tensed for a moment, but Jace placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's fine," he whispered. "Probably just some of the local wildlife, curious creatures." A small group of bioluminescent insects hovered near the water channels, their light reflecting off the tiny streams. Leora laughed softly. "They like it," she said. "Even the smallest creatures can recognize life when it blooms." Jace smiled. "They're welcome here. And so is everyone else, eventually." They worked late into the night, fine-tuning the module and ensuring that the water flow and greenery remained stable. By the time the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the barren land had become a small, thriving oasis. The water shimmered in the morning sun and tiny plants swayed gently in the breeze. Leora stepped back, breathing deeply. She had done it. She had turned desert into life. This will change things, Jace said, his voice quiet but firm. The town will see that intelligence and persistence matter more than appearances, and they'll have to acknowledge your work. Leora felt a mix of pride and apprehension. Public recognition had never been her goal, but she understood now that it was inevitable. The module's success spoke louder than any words ever could. As they packed up the equipment, a small drone accidentally activated, sending live images of the oasis to the town's central screens. By the time Leora realized it, the town square was filled with murmuring voices. People were pointing, whispering, and gathering closer. "She's done it," a child shouted, eyes wide with wonder. "No, that's impossible," muttered an elder, squinting at the screens. Leora's heart pounded. She had intended to keep this test secret for another day. Yet here it was, revealed to everyone. She felt a wave of nervousness. How would the town react? Before she could worry too much, Jace spoke, his voice calm and confident. "Sometimes the world shows the proof for us, and when it does, we embrace it. Not because we planned it, but because it cannot be ignored." The townspeople continued to gather, their voices rising in amazement. Children ran closer to the screens, pointing at the thriving greenery. Merchants paused their work, mouths slightly open in disbelief. Even those who had mocked Leora earlier seemed unsure how to respond. One young man whispered, I didn't think she had it in her." "She's extraordinary," said another woman, her tone softer than before. Leora's cheeks warmed. She had never sought admiration, but the knowledge that her work inspired awe was deeply satisfying. This was not about pride. It was about proving that intelligence, patience, and problem-solving could make a real difference. "Come on," Jace said, taking her hand gently. "Let's show them what else is possible." Together, they guided the town to the edge of the cleared land. As the first residents stepped closer, they gasped in wonder. The once barren soil now glistened with streams of water, and tiny plants swayed in the morning breeze. Birds, curious and cautious, landed nearby, adding a touch of life and color to the scene. Leora stepped forward, her voice clear and steady. "This is the result of months of work. Every calculation, every adjustment, every small trial led to this. This is what we can achieve when we use intelligence, creativity, and care." The crowd was silent for a moment, absorbing the sight. Then slowly applause began. First tentative, then louder, until the entire square echoed with admiration. Children clapped and cheered, adults nodded in recognition, and even the elders allowed themselves a faint smile of approval. Jay stood beside Leora, his hat tilted back, eyes bright. "See," he said softly, "they notice now. They understand the value of what you've done." Leora felt a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she wasn't just the unchosen bride. She was a creator, an innovator, a problem solver, and the town could no longer deny her worth. "Do you see it?" Jace asked, leaning close. "They're beginning to understand that intelligence, patience, and creativity matter. That's the true power of humanity." Leora nodded, feeling a quiet pride. "It's just the beginning," she said. "If this works here, imagine what we can do on a larger scale. Not just for Clayridge, but for the entire planet." Jace smiled. "And that's exactly why I came here, to find someone who sees the world not as it is, but as it could be. Someone brave enough to make it happen." The town continued to marvel at the oasis, unaware of the deeper message being conveyed. Leora realized that she had not only transformed the land, but also minds. The people who had laughed at her were now learning to see beyond appearances. The value of intelligence, persistence, and ingenuity had finally been made visible. As the sun rose higher, bathing the small oasis in golden light, Leora knew that this moment would be remembered. It was not just a victory for her, but for the human spirit, the ability to innovate, to persevere, and to inspire others without seeking glory or fame. And standing beside her, Jace's steady presence reminded her that sometimes recognition came from unexpected allies, those who valued the mind and heart over tradition and shallow judgment. The town had witnessed something extraordinary. And for Leora, the unchosen bride, the story was only beginning. The morning sun poured golden light over Claridge, and the town seemed different somehow. The laughter that had once echoed through the streets at Leora's expense was gone, replaced by whispers of curiosity and cautious admiration. Word of the night's secret demonstration had spread like wildfire. The town had witnessed something extraordinary, green life flourishing in barren soil, and no one could ignore it. Leora stood at the edge of her workshop, her hands brushing over her tools. The module had performed perfectly. Streams of water glistened in the sunlight, and small patches of greenery swayed gently in the breeze. Even the town's children, who had seen the display on the screens, rushed to the outskirts to touch the soft sprouts. Their laughter was pure, untainted by ridicule, and for the first time in years, Leora felt a warmth that had nothing to do with pride. "People are talking," Jace said, standing beside her. His hat was tilted back slightly, and a faint smile played on his lips. "They've seen what you can do. Now the real work begins." "What do you mean?" Leora asked, her gaze scanning the small crowd that had gathered near the outskirts of town. "They're curious, yes," Jace replied, "but curiosity can be fragile. You need to show them more than a few sprouts. You need to help them understand the possibilities." Leora nodded, though a small knot of anxiety formed in her stomach. She had always been focused on results, on making the impossible possible. But now, with so many eyes watching, she had to be careful. One misstep could undo months of work, and she could lose the fragile respect the town had begun to offer. The festival had begun in full swing, and the streets of Claridge were filled with color, sound, and motion. Merchants sold bright fabrics and mechanical toys. Children chased one another between stalls, and the scent of fresh bread and roasted nuts mingled with the earthy aroma of the terraformed soil. But the attention of the crowd kept drifting toward the outskirts, where the oasis had begun to bloom. A group of townspeople approached hesitantly. Their expressions were a mix of skepticism and awe. One elder, a man who had once mocked her openly, stopped and studied the greenery. "Is this really your work?" he asked, voice tinged with disbelief. Leora stepped forward. "Yes, it is," she said quietly but firmly. "It's a small demonstration, but it shows what's possible. With careful planning and the right tools, barren soil can become fertile. Water can flow where there was none. Life can thrive in places we thought impossible." The elder's eyes softened. I never thought of it that way," he admitted. "I thought the land was too harsh, too unforgiving, but you've changed that." Encouraged by his words, Leora began to explain more. She spoke simply, breaking down the module's function for anyone willing to listen. Children crowded around, asking questions with bright eyes. Adults leaned closer, listening carefully, trying to understand the mechanics behind her invention. Jace stayed by her side, guiding the conversation without taking the spotlight. He asked questions that made the explanations easier to follow, praised the young minds who showed interest, and subtly reminded the adults to pay attention. His presence was steady, grounding, and somehow made Leora's words carry more weight. By mid-morning, the town square had emptied of most of its festival visitors. Everyone had come to see the oasis, to watch life emerge where there had once been only dust. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. Leora felt a sense of satisfaction. This was what she had hoped for, not just recognition, but understanding. Still, the selection ceremony loomed. Though she had no interest in participating, she could not ignore the fact that the town's eyes would soon turn to her again. The platform in the square gleamed under the sun, adorned with banners and decorations. The town leaders, clad in ceremonial robes, prepared to call the young adults to the stage. As the announcements began, Leora felt Jace's hand lightly touch hers. "Don't worry," he said softly. "This is your moment, not theirs. You decide what it means." Leora took a deep breath. She had spent years being overlooked, laughed at, and dismissed, but now she had something they could not ignore, proof of her abilities. She had transformed the land, demonstrated the power of intelligence and ingenuity, and shown that she could create solutions far beyond what anyone had expected. When the festival announcer called for participants, a few townspeople murmured among themselves. Leora stepped forward slowly, letting the crowd see her. She no longer felt the sting of their previous laughter. Instead, she felt calm, focused, and ready. Jace followed, walking confidently beside her. His presence was reassuring, as though he silently promised that she would not be judged unfairly this time. The townspeople watched, some with surprise, some with curiosity, and some with tentative admiration. When they reached the platform, Jace addressed the crowd first. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice clear and commanding, "you have seen what Leora is capable of. You have watched her transform barren land into life, using skill, intelligence, and determination. Today is not just about ceremony or tradition. Today is about recognizing the true value of one person's contribution to the community." A hush fell over the crowd. Children clutched their parents' hands, and adults leaned forward, eager to listen. Leora felt her pulse quicken. This was it, the moment where the town could see her not as the unchosen bride, but as someone whose talents could inspire and uplift them all. "She has worked tirelessly," Jace continued. "Not for praise, not for recognition, but because she believes in making life better for everyone. And that is something we should all admire." The applause started slowly, tentative at first, then louder as more townspeople realized the truth of his words. Children cheered, adults clapped, and even the elders allowed themselves a quiet nod of approval. Leora felt a warmth spread through her chest. Then Jace turned toward her. "Leora," he said, his tone gentle but firm, "you have shown us all what is possible. You have proven that intelligence, creativity, and courage matter more than charm or appearances. The choice is yours. How do you wish to move forward?" Leora looked around at the crowd, then back at the oasis she had created. She felt a quiet pride, a sense of accomplishment that no mockery or tradition could diminish. "I want to share this," she said softly but clearly. "I want everyone to understand that we can solve problems, create life, and improve our world if we use our minds and hearts together." The crowd erupted in applause, louder than before. Children ran to the oasis, adults leaned closer to inspect the greenery, and the elders finally smiled openly. Leora realized that this was more than recognition, it was inspiration. She had sparked curiosity, admiration, and hope. Jace's eyes shone with pride. "See. You've done it," he said quietly. "You've changed minds without needing to fight or argue. You've shown them the power of human ingenuity." Leora smiled, feeling a sense of calm she had never known. For years she had been overlooked, mocked, and ignored. But now she understood that true recognition was not about applause alone. It was about changing hearts and minds, inspiring others, and showing what humanity was capable of when it embraced intelligence, creativity, and perseverance. The rest of the day passed in a blur of excitement. The town's festival continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Merchants spoke with newfound respect, children asked questions eagerly, and adults lingered near the oasis, discussing possibilities and imagining what could be achieved next. Leora found herself answering questions, explaining her work, and demonstrating small adjustments to the module. Everywhere she looked, she saw curiosity and admiration. The laughter and ridicule that had once followed her had vanished. The town had begun to see her not as the unchosen bride, but as a person whose talents could change lives. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm glow over the transformed land, Jace leaned closer. "Tomorrow, you'll take the next step," he said. "But tonight enjoy this. You've earned it." Leora nodded, feeling a quiet contentment. For the first time, she understood that recognition was not about proving others wrong. It was about proving to herself and to the world that intelligence, perseverance, and vision mattered. That was the true measure of human greatness. And as the stars began to twinkle above Claridge, the small town on a distant planet, Leora felt a deep sense of hope. The unchosen bride had finally been seen, but this was only the beginning. The world beyond Claridge awaited, and with Jace by her side, Leora knew that together they could inspire change, spark curiosity, and prove the limitless potential of human ingenuity. The crowd continued to watch, marveling at the oasis. Children pointed at the sprouts, parents whispered excitedly, and elders nodded with quiet approval. Leora stood tall, shoulders straight and eyes shining. The town had witnessed something extraordinary. And now, nothing could stop the story from continuing. The morning sun rose over Claridge like a warm promise. The town had awakened to a new reality. Where once dust and dry soil had dominated the outskirts, a small oasis now shimmered under the soft light. Water flowed in gentle streams and tiny plants swayed with the breeze. The sight was breathtaking, and for the first time in years, Leora walked through the town with a sense of quiet pride instead of hesitation. Jace walked beside her, his presence calm and reassuring. His hat shaded his eyes from the sun, but his smile was clear and confident. "Ready for today?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. Leora nodded. "I think so. Today they'll understand, not just see but understand." The town square was alive with anticipation. Word of Leora's demonstration had spread, and almost everyone had come to witness the next step. Merchants paused in their stalls, children gathered in clusters, and elders leaned on walking sticks, eyes bright with curiosity. Even those who had once laughed at Leora approached hesitantly, unsure of what to expect. The platform for the selection ceremony stood at the center of the square, gleaming in the sunlight. Banners fluttered in the gentle breeze, their colors vibrant and cheerful. But unlike previous years, the attention of the crowd was not on the tradition itself, it was on Leora. They had seen the proof of her brilliance, and now they wanted to witness the person behind the invention. Leora took a deep breath. She had never cared for the ceremony in the past. Its rules had always seemed shallow, favoring charm over skill, appearances over intelligence. But today was different. Today, the platform was not a stage for judgment, it was a stage for truth. Jace squeezed her hand gently. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "They'll see who you are and they'll see what humans can achieve when we use our minds and hearts." She smiled faintly. "Then let's show them." As they stepped onto the platform, the crowd fell silent. The whispers of awe and curiosity had grown into a tense anticipation. Every eye was on them. Leora's heart raced, but not with fear. It was excitement, a thrill she had never experienced during the years of mockery and dismissal. Jace spoke first, his voice carrying across the square. "People of Claridge," he began, "you have seen something extraordinary. You have seen barren land transformed into life. You have seen water flow where there was none, and greenery emerge where there was only dust. This is the work of someone you once overlooked, laughed at, and dismissed." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some faces flushed with embarrassment, while others looked at Leora with newfound respect. Children clutched their parents' hands, eyes wide, and elders nodded slowly, recognizing the truth in Jace's words. Leora stepped forward, her voice steady and clear. "I am Leora," she said. "I have worked quietly, not for praise, but because I believe we can make life better for everyone. The oasis you have seen is proof that intelligence, creativity, and perseverance can change our world." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some whispered to each other, questioning their previous judgments. Others simply stared, awestruck by the sight of the thriving greenery. The module had done more than transform soil, it had transformed perceptions. Jace's eyes met Leora's and he gave a small nod. It was time. Without hesitation, he took her hand in his own. The crowd gasped, some in surprise, others in admiration. Jace raised her hand slightly, a gesture of recognition and respect. "And this is Leora," he said, "someone whose courage, skill, and heart prove the power of humanity. She has shown us that true worth is measured not by appearances, but by what we can create, solve, and share with others." The applause started slowly. Tentative claps from children grew louder as adults joined in. Merchants stopped their work to cheer. Even the elders, some who had mocked her in the past, raised their hands in quiet approval. The sound grew into a roar of admiration and celebration. Leora's cheeks warmed, but her smile was calm. For years she had been called the unchosen bride, dismissed as insignificant, overlooked, and laughed at. But now, standing on the platform, she felt a sense of justice that did not come from revenge. It came from truth. The town had finally seen her abilities, her vision, and her courage. Jace spoke again, his voice clear and steady. "Today is not about a ceremony. Today is about humanity. The human mind can solve problems, create life, and inspire others. Leora has reminded us of that. And we should all strive to do the same." A wave of excitement swept through the crowd. Children ran to the oasis, touching the soft green leaves and watching the water ripple in the sunlight. Adults examined the small plants, discussing possibilities for future growth, farms, and water systems. Even the elders smiled openly, some nodding to each other in agreement. Leora felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to see an older woman, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I was wrong about you," the woman said quietly. "You have taught us something important, something we needed to learn." "Thank you," Leora replied softly. "That means more than you know." Jace smiled, watching the interaction. "See, people notice when brilliance can't be hidden. You didn't have to fight or argue, you just showed them what was possible." Leora nodded, feeling a quiet satisfaction. Recognition was no longer her goal. Inspiration was. She had sparked curiosity, admiration, and hope. The town would no longer see her as the unchosen bride. They would see her as a creator, a problem solver, and a visionary. As the day progressed, more townspeople approached to ask questions and offer congratulations. Some sought advice on how to replicate the module for other barren areas. Others discussed ideas for improving water flow or planting more crops. Leora answered patiently, explaining her methods and encouraging experimentation. Jace remained by her side, supporting her and guiding curious minds without taking the spotlight. By afternoon, the town square was alive with energy and collaboration. The festival, once focused on shallow traditions and ceremonies, had transformed into a celebration of human ingenuity, creativity, and perseverance. Children eagerly joined small experiments, adults discussed practical solutions, and elders shared stories of past mistakes and lessons learned. Leora stepped back for a moment, watching the scene unfold. She had never imagined the day would feel like this. The laughter and ridicule that had haunted her for years had been replaced by curiosity, respect, and excitement. The town had begun to see beyond appearances, valuing intelligence, courage, and problem-solving above all else. Jace leaned closer. "Tomorrow we can expand this further," he said. "Other areas of the planet, larger projects, more people involved. The possibilities are endless." Leora smiled, feeling a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. "Yes," she said, "and we'll do it together. Not for fame, not for recognition, but because it's the right thing to do. Because humans can create, improve, and inspire when we work together." The sun dipped lower, casting a warm glow over the oasis and the town. Water shimmered, plants swayed, and the townspeople continued to marvel at what they had witnessed. The unchosen bride, once overlooked and laughed at, had become a symbol of human potential. She had shown that intelligence, perseverance, and creativity were the true measures of worth. Jace took her hand again, smiling. "You've done more than change minds," he said softly. "You've changed hearts, and that is the greatest achievement of all." Leora looked around at the town, the oasis, and the people who had once doubted her. She felt a sense of fulfillment that went beyond recognition or celebration. She had inspired others, sparked curiosity, and proven the power of human ingenuity. As the stars began to twinkle above Claridge, the town quieted for a moment. Children gazed at the sky, dreaming of possibilities. Adults whispered to each other about what could be done next. Even the elders who had once clung stubbornly to tradition nodded in approval, finally understanding the value of vision, courage, and intelligence. Leora stood on the platform, hand in Jace's, and looked out over the transformed land. The unchosen bride had been seen, recognized, and celebrated, not for vanity, not for appearances, but for what she had achieved, what she had created, and what she had inspired. And as she watched the water flow and the plants sway, she realized that this was only the beginning. The world was full of challenges, barren lands, and possibilities waiting to be discovered. With courage, intelligence, and perseverance, humans could create solutions, inspire others, and change the world. Jace squeezed her hand gently. "Are you ready?" he asked. Leora smiled, her heart steady and strong. "Yes," she said, "we have work to do, and this time the town and the world will see what humans can achieve." The crowd cheered once more, a wave of appreciation, admiration, and hope sweeping through Claridge. The festival continued, but it had transformed into something deeper, richer, a celebration of human ingenuity, perseverance, and the power to inspire. And in that moment, Leora understood something she had never known before, that true recognition came not from tradition, ceremony, or applause, but from the impact one person could have on the minds and hearts of others. The unchosen bride had finally taken her place, not on the platform of shallow tradition, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who had witnessed her brilliance. Humanity had won. The sun set over Claridge, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The oasis glimmered in the fading light, a symbol of possibility, hope, and achievement. Leora stood beside Jace, ready to face the challenges ahead, knowing that with intelligence, courage, and collaboration, there were no limits to what humans could achieve. And so, the story ended not with laughter, mockery, or dismissal, but with admiration, inspiration, and the undeniable truth of human potential.